Hello dear friends, it's Carly and welcome back to another video. In this video we are talking about the Gemini North Node and specifically how can you as a Gemini North Node or North Node in the third house, how can you get the most out of this transit of the North Node going through Taurus right now. So that's a larger transit that's happening for everyone. We all have the same planets moving in the same places in the sky, so collectively we're experiencing this North Node transit through Taurus. I made a whole video on that. Feel free to check it out if you're interested and you haven't seen it already. But there were so many people who wanted to know, like, how do we connect the pieces between this Taurus North Node transit that we're going through as a collective, where really all of those transits of the North Node, the different chapters, are to help us live out our natal North Node placement. So how can Gemini North Nodes or third house North Nodes make the most of developing their Taurus skill set through this transit? So that's the goal of this video, is to lay out some highlights of Jan Spiller's book, Astrology for the Soul. I highly recommend. I cannot overstate abundantly enough that like this book feels like receiving an energetic lottery winning. It feels like $1 million energetically. Like, it's just huge, the amount of impact that this book punches. And I use the word punch because you feel just a little bit called out. You feel just a little bit challenged. And that's the point, man. The way she puts it, it's so good to sit with. Each chapter really is what I'm finding, and this is especially interesting making this Gemini one, as I'm only using really the overview, like the first 5 minutes. She just does some quick highlights, so I've kind of collected those, and I'm going to relay those here in a little while and then have some discussion. But I also listened to the full nearly 2-hour chapter on Gemini North Node, and that's not my placement. My North Node is in Pisces in the 12th house, so nothing to do with Gemini in the 3rd house. But I do have my Sun, Chiron, Venus, Mercury in Gemini, and the Sun and Chiron are in the 3rd house. So that is interesting, that not my North Node placement, but it is a place of woundedness and giftedness in my chart. The Sun and Chiron are both there in Gemini in the 3rd house, and that Gemini North Node chapter was extremely powerful for me personally to sit with and to contemplate the development of what she's talking about. So I do highly recommend that you take in her whole book, this whole video series, like regardless of what your personal North Node placements are. Like, obviously pay extra close attention to those ones, but really any of these discussions are helpful because it always comes back to we are all made up of all 12 zodiac energies. And I love how Jan puts it at the beginning of her book, where she says the North Node placement is the place of your deepest dysfunction. And that sounds a little harsh, but what she meant, I think, is that like that is the most underdeveloped side of your energy, and specifically the South Node is the most overdeveloped side of our energy. It's where we've achieved mastery in past life. At this point, coming back and working with that energy, it's just beating a dead horse. We've chewed all the flavor out of that gum. We got as high as we could achieving wise in that energy. And now we're here to focus on developing and building up this underdeveloped side of ourselves, and Jan interprets that that's the North Node. So that is like, I don't know why, I just have such a fascination with the nodes themselves. I also learned a fun fact. Maybe this is fun because this is the Gemini North Node video. So like, let's share all the fun facts out of Jan's book, the intro, where she shared that birth charts repeat every 25,000 years. I had never heard that. I don't know if it's true or not. That's my source for that. I thought it was really interesting to contemplate that, like, there's not one of you for 25,000 years. Like, just think about like how unique and how intentional each and every one of our lives is on behalf of the universe. Like, just so loving this universe that we get to call home. The other thing that she shared was that there are nodes for every single planet, and that the nodes, as we commonly study them and refer to them as the North Node and the South Node, those are the nodes of the moon. And I may be late to the party and like all of you already knew that. Dude, I didn't. So there you go. There's that. All the planets have nodes. Whoa. Okay. So that would be very interesting to, like, you know, if you're really focusing into your Saturn energy, to like figure out your Saturn nodes and past life and future, like, mind blown that we could be doing the nodes on all the planets. Who knew? Not me. So yeah, these are the nodes of the moon specifically. I don't know what that adds to my understanding. So far, not much, but I did find it very interesting. So like I mentioned, I'm going to use the overview section of the chapter for the Gemini North Node. This would also apply if your North Node is in a different sign, but it does fall in the 3rd house. In that case, it's like you kind of got to put both sides of it together. It's like, listen to this one for the 3rd house side, and then listen to the video for the sign that your node is in. And then through resonating with both of them individually, there can be a later process, like through your intuition, of like putting those pieces together. And that is something that just kind of unfolds and reveals itself over time after you've soaked up that initial information. At least that's my experience. I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments what your process is like for like, how do you tie the things together when it's something in a sign that doesn't match that house. And same thing, if your Gemini North Node isn't in the 3rd house, it falls in a different house, make sure you go check out that video to find that piece of your personal North Node placement. So first we're going to go through the 4 sections of the overview chapter, and then we'll get into, towards the end, talking about how can you specifically use this Taurus North Node transit, or building up your Taurus skill set, to help further your Gemini North Node soul mission. So the 4 sections that I'm going to go through are attributes to develop, tendencies to leave behind, Achilles heel / trap to avoid, and what you really want. And I'm going to do my best to like read the list and save my discussion for the end, but yeah, I'm give it a shot. Okay, so attributes to develop: healthy curiosity, asking questions to learn how others think, treating conversation as a vehicle for curiosity and learning about other people, tact. And the reason for that, the reason that tact is worth developing, is because ultimately Gemini North Node is a bearer of truth. Really all Gemini energy at the end of the day, like, there is powerful ability to channel truth from the universe, like universal loving truth comes through Gemini because they're simply open. So cultivating that openness, which is really tact, I think, like, tact and openness, I think they go hand in hand, where basically openness is kind of a foundational respect that everyone's allowed to be how they are. You know, like, I'm allowed to be how I am, you're allowed to be how you are, and you being how you are doesn't change what I'm allowed to be. Like, there's just an openness. There's a not feeling governed by what other people are choosing, and knowing that it's more fluid than that. So being a bearer of truth, your mission, your soul's mission, is to relay truth as logically and detached as possible, which will basically allow the other person the serenity to be able to receive what you're telling them when you're coming to them in a very gentle, open, understanding way. There's more of an energetic communication that happens that puts the person at ease, because you're not judging them. You're not saying that they need to line up with your version of the truth, which is more on that Sagittarius South Node end. So allowing yourself to feel serenity invites them into serenity, which means that the chances of your message being delivered is even greater. And she says in the book that, 100 messages that fall on deaf ears are worth way less than 10 messages that are deeply understood. So when we talk about delivering messages, it's not just saying it, it's not just getting it off your chest. It really is about the other person and what they heard and what they understood and what they took away from the situation. Like, your memory of the message is one thing, but them getting the message and getting the value from it is something completely different. And this is so freaking powerful, so cool, is that yes, you are the bearer of the truth, and in order to be able to have that truth and know what it is, the truth that you're meant to share with them, the first step is listening to them, and we're going to talk more about that here in just a little bit. But you do have to listen in order to let the alchemical Gemini channeling process come through and do its thing, where basically as you listen, as you absorb what they're telling you, a truth forms inside of you naturally, and that's what you give them, right? Like, if we cut them off in the first sentence and jump to the conclusion that we know what they're going to say, then we prevent ourselves from really understanding what it is that they're facing, what it is that they're thinking, and we prevent ourselves from being able to truly deliver the message because we've already missed the mark. We don't even know what they're talking about. We don't even know where they're coming from. So listening, and then as you are able to sit with their perspective, their mindset, their point of view, and be with that openly and allow that truth to rise inside of you, chances are, most of the time, the truth is not just an answer to their right now, maybe small to you question. Like, the fact that they're showing up in front of you with a genuine question at all means you should focus in and listen. I hate to use the word should, but really absorb what they're telling you, because here's what ends up happening. You tell them what sounds like to you a very simple truth. They take it in the moment. It answers their immediate concern. Cool. They solved maybe what seems to you to be a small problem. Fast forward to later on that night, that same person is now laying in their bed trying to go to sleep, and in their mind it all of a sudden dawns on them that this whole situation, the little problem they were facing and the little truth that you gave them is actually a metaphor for their whole freaking life, and now they have a whole new way of looking at their life. That's what ends up happening. These truths that maybe feel small in the moment, and the listening to the problem that maybe seems so minute in the moment, it's a pathway. It's an opening into a larger understanding that you can absolutely move this person's understanding by light years. You have that capability. And a lot of times, that Sagittarius South Node wants to kick into overdrive and hop into action immediately and teach them some stuff, drop some knowledge, here's some truth, let me tell you. And dude, you're powerfully knowing the truth, and that's not wrong. That is a basis of many, many lifetimes that you have had seeking personal truth and wisdom. And even she talks about being around people at all is kind of the stretch. It's learning how to socialize with other people can be a very slow going and frustrating process for you at first. She even went so far as to say Gemini North Node people a lot of times can stutter in early life just because their understanding is so huge, and basically it's a whole nother process to take your imagination, which is essentially where our thoughts happen, and turn it into spoken word. Communication is a skill, and that's what Gemini does, is communicate. It turns things on the understandings on the inside into things that you can express on the outside. So learning how to communicate and developing the patience to be able to communicate, because that does take a lot of patience when you have a gigantic understanding. The initial space in that is, where do I even start? Where do I even begin to communicate, which is to say leave the other person understanding what I understand, on the inside, right? Like, I don't want to just say it out loud. I want you to understand it. I want you to take it away with you as a seed that's now planted and it stays with you for the rest of your life. That's what effective communication is capable of. Words that stay with people for the rest of their lives. And as a Gemini North Node, that's ultimately like your soul's purpose, is to speak words that stay with people for the rest of their life. But in order to do that, the answer is to listen. And this is again where pretty much anytime we start talking about any of the North Nodes, what you really want and how to get there seem kind of counterintuitive, right? Like, I want to speak truth. I want to be heard. I want people to learn from me. I want people to understand how wise I am. And how do I get there? Yeah, teach me. How do I get that? Totally, I'll teach you. Be quiet and soak up their point of view. Let them give it to you and receive it graciously and openly. And when they're done talking, instead of responding, ask them a question. Ask them a deeper question. Go deeper than they even thought to go, because you want to deepen your understanding in their point of view. And when you're satisfied that you're adequately deep enough into their point of view to thoroughly understand what it is that they're trying to communicate, from that space you have the truth of the universe at your disposal to offer to them. So it's like there's so many different pieces in terms of attributes to develop. There's like the patience to be able to listen. There's the security and knowing that eventually it will be your turn to speak, right? That like listening is not in vain. Listening is actually an extremely powerful tool when it comes to communication. So there's a lot of different pieces at play here. So tendencies to leave behind: self-righteousness, aloofness, and just FYI, she says aloofness comes from past lifetimes on mountaintops alone, seeking inner truth and wisdom. So quite literally, you're just removed from society. So having social skills is something to work towards, and being able to relate to others and connect to others, again, it comes back so many times to listening. Assuming you know what others think, careless spontaneity, taking oneself too seriously, acting on intuition without checking the facts. So that is, describing those Sagittarius South Node shadow behaviors, essentially. And this is ultimately a lifetime where you're here to re-engage with people. You're here to kind of leave behind that individual internal knowingness of, I don't want to, actually, let me say that better. I don't want to say leave behind, because it's never really about leaving behind our South Node. It's about integrating it in its highest frequency and form and using it to empower our North Node evolution. And so how you can understand that in this context of Gemini North Node, Sagittarius South Node, is that Sagittarius South Node means you are never going to lose the ability to know what's true. And just know that no matter what anybody else is doing, you get to do what works for you, no matter what. I can't say that enough. No matter what, you get to decide what's true for you. That's always going to be the case. Nobody is ever going to take that away from you. So that's a place to kind of find your security, is that you have total freedom to feel the resonance with your own truth. And I think in that, like, harnessing of that South Node and Sagittarius ability, like that anchor point of like, you're never not gonna know what the truth is. Like, you're always gonna have that. So it's like, why not open up out into the world? Like, open up to really being with the way other people see things. Really, like, allowing, maybe even especially people who see the world just totally different from you, allowing yourself to suspend your own viewpoint long enough to take on their viewpoint. And this is where Gemini gets kind of the bad rap of being flaky, or like bouncing from one thing to the next, or having like multiple personality, or like they're fake or whatever. It's really not like that. It's more like, or when you have a really strong Gemini energy in your makeup, It's like you're really good at setting your viewpoint aside, trying on somebody else's viewpoint, and what inevitably ends up happening is that sometimes they have better ideas than you had, right? Like you find something that's even more close to the truth than what you were operating on before. And now, after you've sat with their viewpoint, you go back to your own internal Sagittarius place of knowing what's true for you, and you get to update your own truth. You get to update your own beliefs. And this can come in lots of forms. Like I know, especially in the third house, we're talking about like day-to-day life. So especially if your North Node is in the third house, like we're talking about like the person standing in line behind you at the coffee shop, the cashier at the grocery store, your waitress at breakfast, like these random people that, sometimes like when you're really not even trying to, you just end up striking up this conversation about life and wisdom, and like life is a school, we're here to evolve. And not necessarily those words, but like you have a conversation that like really matters to not only your evolution, but theirs. So these are the types of run-ins that we would expect with the third house side of this. And really with Gemini in general, it's like you're built to like speak to anybody, to be able to offer truth, like truth for the highest good of that soul's evolution to anybody. Doesn't matter what they think. Doesn't matter what you think. You can, with this practice in this North Node in Gemini space, with that practice, you can suspend your viewpoint long enough to take on theirs and use your superpower of being able to feel what the truth is and then offer them that truth. And you know what? Like that truth will resonate with them, and it will come from a place of your own personal connection to the universe. So it's like literally you can open yourself up and take on the perspectives and the beliefs of people that, you could consider them heinous. You could consider them to be vile human beings, and you can still serve their soul's evolution by taking in their perspective and offering the truth that you can feel inside of yourself. So that willingness to be open and receptive to other people is essentially what the Gemini North Node is all about. The Achilles heel / trap to avoid is self-righteousness, which is basically the need to be right at all costs and kind of like arguing that point to death until the other person agrees that you're correct. And basically like what she talks about in the book is like when you're doing that out in the world, like when you're Gemini, when your North Node is in Gemini, and you're out in the world trying to push your truth on other people, it's like they have to resist you. They have to. That's like the South Node programming not working for you anymore. Their resistance is letting you know that you're operating on the South Node side. If you were operating on the Gemini side, they would be eating up your every single word that you were willing to spend time with them and give them your perspective. So yeah, it's like know where you're at as far as if you're a Gemini North Node. So this looks like she makes it very clear that they're not rejecting your point of view. They're not rejecting your ideas. They're not saying you're wrong. They're basically like resisting you on an unconscious level because you're pushing at it from a South Node end. You're trying to operate on those past life patterns instead of moving into the future North Node patterns that you're trying to develop. And you'll basically know you're on the right track when people are receptive to what you're saying. Because when you truly listen to them, you are so gifted, I can't say it enough times, you're so gifted at knowing what the truth is that when you truly listen to somebody, you have their answer. Bada bing, bada boom, there's your answer. Like, people don't needlessly reject people like that. They treat them like the valuable souls that they are. So that's kind of your barometer to know when you're on the right track. And I have like one Gemini North Node in mind who I watched him on a podcast, and he was talking about like dropping some knowledge on this person, and person was just like really not like having it, and he couldn't understand why, because like he felt so strongly about the truth he was presenting. And after the fact he was like, yeah, I should probably like go talk to him and like see what he thinks and maybe like explore a little more. And that's like that Gemini North Node side like coming out to realize like in order for me to be effective, the very first step is to listen to what the other person has to say. So how can developing your Taurus skill set help you if you're a Gemini North Node? So I have a few thoughts on these, and I would love to hear from you down in the comments as far as how these resonate, but a few things. So listening requires a lot of patience, like a lot. And as a person with heavy Gemini energy, I totally resonate with this idea that listening requires a lot of patience. Like, especially when your brain moves so fast, which is what ends up happening when you have strong Sagittarius energy and strong Gemini energy for that matter. But like, it's like your brain is moving so fast that the trap is that you can jump ahead to what you think the truth is. And again, that's where we close ourselves off. So to be able to sit there and like openly receive while the other person is like finding their words, or like really having to conjure the words to put their thoughts out there for you to hear them, like that can take a minute. And to sit and to receive openly and not jump into the speaking mode, like holding that space open for another person, like again, this is a skill set that's like, it's meant to take our whole life to really develop it and be good at it. So it's really not a matter of like being perfect at doing this. It's like recognizing when you are jumping into that Sagittarius South Node side, or when you are allowing that space to be open, to really make sure that you are fully and deeply understanding the other person's point of view. So obviously building up our Taurus is just helping to slow down our vibration overall. It really just like slows our frequency. And when our frequency is slower, our brain is flowing at a slower pace. Our thoughts are flowing at a slower pace. And if you can feel what I just did there, like we can lower our frequency just by breathing, just by bringing awareness to slowing down. And again, building this capacity to intentionally slow yourself down, aka get really good at Taurus energy. Your ability to listen goes through the roof. And if your ability to listen goes through the roof, like we talked about, the rest is history. If you can take in what they're saying, you will be able to offer the truth. So sit there long enough and you will come up with the nugget of gold that the person is looking for. In general, Taurus just really builds our presence in the now. Like Taurus is a very being energy. It's associated with our five senses, and it is a good way to like anchor back into the physical moment that we are in. Like again, with the Sagittarius South Node, your mind can just wander and like jump ahead, or it's over here now and like it's associating this other thing that reminds you of that, and it's like now you're not listening. And so again, Taurus like brings us back into that present moment. And last but not least, I believe purging Scorpio helps to detach from needing the validations of others telling us that we're right. And this is like, again, goes for anybody who has like, they're working on that Gemini Sagittarius end of the spectrum, because again, to achieve that total openness, you have to be willing to listen to people who have different ideas from you and not jump into judgment about what they're saying. And when you really sit with judgment, it's like a need for other people to conform with the way that you see things. And that, if you go a little deeper, comes out of a place of being insecure in what you really believe. And so again, that's where your Sagittarius anchor, it's not going anywhere. You know what you believe. There's no risk. There's literally zero risk of you opening up and listening to somebody else, because if you want to call bullshit, then call bullshit. You don't have to believe a single word they say, but you do have to entertain it all openly and without judgment, right? Like just let it happen, let it be. And that's where Taurus is brilliant at letting it be. Taurus is practicing appreciation for whatever moment is rising in front of their face. Taurus is stretching out in the patch of sunlight on the ground and just being in that moment. Taurus is letting the love of the universe flow through them. Taurus doesn't need to be told they're right because they know they are. So again, anchor into your Sagittarius South Node. Your truth isn't going anywhere. Nobody can change your mind for you. Only you can do that. So there's no risk in opening up and letting other people talk to you. and then asking the questions, because that's really the fun part of Gemini, is like sometimes it really isn't a message per se, like you're giving them the answer. It's more a message like you're inspired to ask them the exact right question. You don't need to know what the answer is. They know the answer. They know their truth just like you know yours. So it's not always about giving them the truth like there's some kind of kindergartner who doesn't know what it is. I would argue kindergartners know way more than we give them credit for, but that's a talk for another day. But it's more like leading them to their own truth, like helping them to see past any dust that they may have kicked up, where, you know, in their mind, in their perspective, they're considering way too many factors that like don't really matter. And you can see that, and it's like one thing to tell them that and just tell them like, here's where you're going wrong. It's a whole nother thing to listen a little longer, really listen to their story, really like put yourself in that mindset of like what they did, what are the steps they've already taken, and what is the decision point that they're trying to work with here. And chances are what's going to come through you is a question that says, why did you do that in the first place? And they're like, I hadn't really thought about that. Well, it was because blah, 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 blah. That's so interesting. Oh my gosh, I hadn't even, so that's this bigger thing that's been happening my whole, and now they're off knowing their own truth. It's not your job to give them their truth. They have it inside of themselves. And it's your job to like help them to just think about the right pieces, you know, to lead them and to let your intuition give you the perfect message in the perfect moment. And chances are it's going to be a question, not a statement. So again, these are all just kind of markers to try to figure out, where am I? Am I on my South Node side trying to repeat the old patterns and beat the dead horse? Or am I actually doing my soul's evolution, that I signed up to come here and do this? And that looks like this Gemini end of being open, listening, entertaining the worldview of other people. So, and then cherry picking what works best for you. So yes, I would love to hear from you guys down in the comments below as far as how this resonated, whether you're Gemini North Node, third house North Node. If you don't have either of those placements and you have other things going on in Gemini in your third house, I would really love to hear from you, because like I said, I am getting value out of every single one of these chapters. So yeah, I'm super excited to move on and record the next couple. Yes, we shall see what they are. So stay tuned, because I have more of these coming, more videos in general coming. You all being here has overflowed me with inspiration, let me just tell you. And I thank you so much for your presence in this space. Until next time, you take such good care of yourselves. And so will I.